Hey there, everybody. Professor Snart checking in as we get right down to the end of our course and kind of walking through the last few steps of working on finishing up and then, of course, submitting our final essay. So the final essay is obviously the last one in our course, but in some ways it's the capstone for the whole composition sequence, both 1101 and 1102. So there's a lot of those pieces that we're trying to put together. So that's why we're, unlike our first essay, we're taking it in a few kind of like micro steps. But because of our format here, the turnaround between the various sort of individual steps that we're going through is pretty quick. So it's really important, especially as we get right to the end of our course, to be aware of those due dates and really staying on top of things. We only have like literally a few days left in our course to finish these things up and put it all together. So I'm recording this on Monday the 26th, so we're kind of here in Unit 10. We have a couple of different things going on. There is still a discussion board. It's very much like the Unit 9 discussion board. You're just kind of updating us on your topic, thesis, primary texts that you're comparing, but also a note on your secondary sources. So again, just kind of keeping everybody plugged into what's going on. So that has the normal due date system, right? Noon, Tuesday the 27th, and replies to by the end of the day. Just give us an update, right? And then I think the more important part, and the one that takes a little more work scheduling, is the student conference. So this is the opportunity for us to meet individually, either virtually or face-to-face. And virtually we meet through the virtual office system here built into Blackboard. You might want to sort of test it out beforehand, just in case there's like a webcam or microphone setup, or you have to click a few buttons. It's pretty seamless in my experience, but you don't want to spend the first 5 minutes of your 10-minute time just getting the technology to work. Okay, so the idea of the conference then is to sort of push you a little bit to get as much of the essay done as possible, even if you know it's still in really draft form, it needs editing, it needs some revision, but the more you have on paper, the more we can actually look at. So in face-to-face, we'll actually, read it in real time here. Even virtually, we can share screens, so we can be looking at the same document and talking about it. And that's your best opportunity to get feedback, like directly, not just generically about a thesis statement or sources, but about your particular essay and all of its parts. So again, the more you have together, the more valuable that conference time is. It's not a mandate, so of course, if you still are brainstorming, that's what we'll talk about, but you're kind of behind if that's still where you're at. So again, it's a way of checking in, but also a way of really kind of encouraging you to get as much of that essay done now as possible. And then we turn around pretty quickly to our very focused peer exchange system. You'll find yourself in a very small group for practical purposes. In the peer exchange unit, there's a little checklist that you're going to fill out for every person in your group, which will just be 1 or 2 people. But notice again, it's pretty quick. So we've had our conference. You've hopefully done the discussion board. You've maybe made even some updates, some improvements, some additions to your paper from this meeting. Then you post for peer exchange by the 28th. Let's do like noon if possible to give people a little more time. And then you're providing feedback to everybody in your group who posts on time, obviously, and in a format that's accessible, so a file that actually works. You're providing that feedback in the form of that the checklist that you're giving back, and maybe a little encouraging note about, oh, this looks good, or really liked your creative idea, sort of just to keep everyone positive. And then you have a really quick, again, turnaround to make some last-minute sort of polishing here, and then submitting by Friday, June 30th, really the end of our course. So lots of almost like one day this, the next day this, the next day this. But again, it's partly because we've broken things down into these really micro steps to give you the opportunity to get as much, feedback from me, from classmates, as much time for incorporating that feedback as possible within the constraints of our pretty short term here. So one other note that I've mentioned before about the conferences, I get that scheduling can be difficult. People take online classes because they don't always have a traditional schedule going on. and then add into that our 5-week format where people are even sometimes more pressed for time. So I totally get if a real-time meeting, either virtual or face-to-face, isn't really feasible. If that's the case, then just send me an email and we can probably just agree to correspond by email. It's not as ideal, as you can imagine, as us actually sitting together and looking at your essay in real time, being able to get that feedback. But if we do that, if we agree to the more of the email correspondence, you'll still get credit for the conference. And obviously, it's really just like any other time. You can always reach out by email. What you want to do, though, is rather than sending me like a whole essay to look at and sort of pre-grade, which I can't really do, if you have targeted things that you want to ask about, like does the intro work, the thesis good, can you look at the works cited page, if you want to build a little checklist for me, then we can certainly do that. And I'll try to get that back to you, so of course you can work through the rest of the due dates. Okay, so there are, points again associated with each of these things, fairly small, relatively speaking, but certainly you want to be doing things on time, whether it's the conference, obviously the discussion board, the peer exchange, and then of course, again, that capstone project for our course, but also really the whole comp sequence is your final essay. So that's where the most points in the course are, and where we're looking to put all the pieces from what we've learned, thesis statements, organization, effective comparison, the whole research part of it, the works cited, putting all those things together. And one little quick note then, which we really haven't talked a lot about since early in the course, is plagiarism. And like I said before, I don't ever think, like in the very rarest of cases, do people take a course, they sign up, and from day one they're like, I'm going to plagiarize my way through this course. I mean, maybe that happens once in 1,000 times, but very rarely. Even plagiarism itself is fairly rare in my experience. But when it happens, I think it often happens not as a conscious choice early, but somewhere down here, you're sort of behind, you don't have a topic that's totally working, or you haven't managed your time very well, etc., etc. You know that the big points are here, the due date's coming around the corner, and people just kind of panic a little bit and they make a bad choice. But it has serious repercussions, as you can imagine. But I don't think it's a planned thing. It just is sort of like you paint yourself into a corner and then you're stuck. So I want to remind people to be really, really conscious of that. Manage your time as effectively as you can over this last, basically, week of our course. And your final essay is run through a system in Blackboard. They call it Safe Assign, but it's basically like Blackboard just Googles your paper. So they run it through the web search, they run it through, compared against databases, all kinds of stuff, whatever the machinery of it is. And it reports back. So your essay goes through that process. And so, for as easy it is to Google stuff on the writer's end, it's as easy to catch kind of on the Blackboard learning end too. And at this point in our course, you don't want to make the mistake of cutting and pasting from some website or something and not citing correctly and then saying, oh, I didn't know, or oh, it was just a mistake. That's a really, really costly mistake and one that you can't back out of. So just be really conscious of that. And again, I'm making a mountain out of a molehill in some ways, because I don't think people sort of plan to do that really early in a course. And if they do it here, it's just for lack of time management, and it's not even something I want to dwell on, but just to be aware that it's very easy to catch, and the policy for the course is really clear that it's just an automatic F. Even if it's just a sentence that's borrowed, air quotes, right, from some other website or whatever, even if you change the wording a little bit, all the things people try to do, that's plagiarism. And we know that. We covered it way back in Unit 2, I think it was. The whole idea of the final assignment, where you're comparing a text from our course but then something kind of more from your area of interest, is designed to make it like a, not plagiarism proof, but really not a topic that you could just Google and find out. So it's sort of designed to really encourage people right away from plagiarism. Not that, again, I think it's a common problem, but just so it's on the table. And again, the automatic F for the course policy is pretty severe, don't get me wrong, but it's in place because, again, this is the capstone big point assignment for the whole research course 1102, so if you're plagiarizing there, that's pretty serious. But it's also really the end of your whole composition sequence, 1101, 1102. And if you're choosing to plagiarize there, there's just that's sort of a zero tolerance policy. So, okay, I've said quite enough about that. So once again, right, as we look at our actual units, make sure that you're in touch with me about these conferences, you're on top of the peer exchange, and then of course, right, submitting your final essay. Outside of the required work for the units, you can always send me an email if you have questions or concerns or, whatever's going on. I always feel like one of the things that makes for good writing or effective writing is just sort of the writer has confidence that he or she is on the right track, doing something correctly, has a good topic, the sources make sense. Even if you're kind of 85, 90% sure it's right, if you can be 100%, it just makes the writing that much better and you that much more comfortable. So you're not, overly stressed or anxious. Again, that's sort of one of the things that leads to bad choices here, right at the tail end of our course. Okay, so I'll leave it at that for now. Not much to look at that I showed you, but a little bit to listen to. And again, be in touch with me. Confident writing is usually pretty good writing, so it's better to know for 100% sure than just to be even guessing a little bit.